Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all joining us online. A warm welcome to this online session, Water as a Catalyst for Peace, Sustainable Solutions. My name is Eric Schnetzler, and I work for the Geneva Water Hub, and it is my pleasure and honor to moderate this online session today from rainy Geneva. So we have three panelists today here joining us in Geneva, as well as one panelist joining us online from Africa. First, let me thank the organizers of Stockholm Worldwide Week for giving us the opportunity to have this online session today, and to our co-organizers, the IFRC, who are also hosting us who are here in Geneva, in their premises in Geneva. And let me just say that today's conversation is really about urgency and opportunity. Water reflects both the best and the worst in humanity. It sustains life and cultures, nourishes and cleanses. Yet, in today's world, it's too often neglected and, tragically, even weaponized. Destroyed and decaying water systems deepen vulnerability, fuel social tensions, and erode trust. And it's not only that conflicts may arise or be exacerbated by water, so-called water conflicts. Instead, we see that in almost every conflict today, water plays a role. The United Nations has counted more than 100 active conflicts worldwide, and in basically all of them, water plays a major role, whether through the deliberate targeting of systems in Gaza and Yemen, for instance, the capping of supply to Crimea in 2014, or the destruction of the Kharkovka Dam in Ukraine in 2023. But beyond these visible cases, there are countless other conflicts far less covered by the media, and they show that water quietly shapes both suffering but also resilience. But it doesn't have to be this way. As a shared resource that transcends political, social, and geographic divides, water can become a powerful entry point for dialogue, trust building, and indeed cooperation. Approached with principles of equity and steered towards ensuring dignity, it can lay the foundations not only for humanitarian relief, but also for stability and social cohesion. In today's session, we want to re-emphasize that across the humanitarian development peace nexus, collaboration is no longer optional. It is essential. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today's session. Very briefly, we'll have around 1 hour, so it's a short time, and we'll try to keep the time. So first, let me introduce to my right, Maria Pinzon, who is currently serving as the Global Head of Water Systems, Strengthening at the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the IFRC. Maria has extensive experience in the water security and WASH, health, livelihoods, climate change, and adaptation sectors, and she has participated in over 35 missions in 27 countries. So Maria, thank you very much for joining us. Then to my left, we have Natalia Blanco-Guyat, a senior humanitarian professional with over a decade of experience designing and leading impactful programs in complex conflict environments. Natalia currently serves as policy advisor at the ICRC, where she plays a strategic role in integrating engineering expertise into the organization's international humanitarian law, prevention, and protection efforts, being the ICRC's thematic expert on the protection of essential services in the conduct of hostilities. Then we have Jean Villemain, who leads the Geneva Water Hub's engagement in the Sahel and West Africa, where the organization has been facilitating a multi-stakeholders dialogue on water as a driver for peace in the region since at least 2018. Before joining the Geneva Water Hub, he worked in the field of humanitarian and human rights, both for international organizations and NGOs, with a decade of engagement on water governance issues. And last but not least, it's my pleasure to also give a warm welcome to Dr. Boubacar Bari, who is a senior researcher and advisor with over 40 years of experience in hydrology, irrigation, and rural development across Africa. He's a research associate at IPAR, a Dakar-based think tank on rural development, and since 2017 has chaired the technical committee of experts of the Global Water Partnership in West Africa. Dr. Bari, thank you very much for joining us online.
Thank you.
So a couple of housekeeping rules, just very quickly for you participants. Please post your questions that you may have in the chat as they arise. We'll also have a dedicated section later in the session where we will select some of the questions in the chat, so you'll have the opportunity to ask our panelists directly some questions. With this, just to say that again, this session is about moving from siloed responses to operational collaboration, where humanitarian actors, development agencies, governments, and communities truly work side by side. And with that framing, let's move to our panelists. And I'd like us to start off with Maria Pinzon from the IFRC to present us a bit about conflicts around water and from the experience that the IFRC has had, particularly with community level water and peace. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, dear Eric, for being here today. And thank you, colleagues in every... Yeah, please let me know if you hear me. Yes, I hope so. I hope you do. So I've been told that I just have 5 minutes, so I'm going to share very briefly what we do around water and peace, or water for peace within the IFRC. It is a pleasure to be here today at the World Water Week. I was there last year also speaking about water and peace. We launched last year within the events framework, our agreement with the Water, Peace and Security Consortium. And this year, we're not launching anything, but it will come. And we will give you the news in the next weeks about a new partnership that we've worked on for the last year. The IFRC is a network organization, international organization, where 191 national societies, meaning Red Crescents and Red Crosses, come together to become stronger on our work, the work that we do in order to support the most vulnerable people around the world. So I wanted to say this because our work with communities, with local communities, is at the heart of everything we do. And water and peace became, or it is, a great component of our water security strategy 2024-2030. And our decision to make it a solid pillar of it came because of the need of our local communities to work around water and peace. So for decades, we've been strong leaders within the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector internationally, and using water as a catalyst for peace, saying that water is causing a lot of conflict. So how can we do in order to convert water into a peace tool instead of a conflict one? So, as I said, we included the Water for Peace focus area in our latest strategy because of the need of our communities in the field. People shouldn't be fighting over water. Water is a human right and is something that we should have there immediately and in the correct amount in order to run our daily lives. This goes beyond water, sanitation, and hygiene within our own households, but water is needed for every other sector at any level of our daily lives. I wanted to talk about, if you, just to set a little bit the scene, talking about the number of water-related conflicts up to 2023, which are the latest reports that are out there. And this one came in August 2024. It gave us figures up to 2023 on how many water-related conflicts we had in the world. And it is quite worrisome to see that in the last years, these instances have grown up to 50%. So according to the study, there were conflicts last up to 2024 involving access to water in every major region in the world. These are things that we do not see on the news, or that even working within the humanitarian sector, we are not identifying or realizing. So here is just an image coming from that report that I was telling you about, which showcases how many conflicts around water, either being a trigger or a casualty or a specific weapon of war. This is what we can see up to now and what is happening and how it has increased from 2022 to 2023. So just to see quickly what is happening only in Africa, which is not the region with the let's say higher number of conflicts. It is Asia Pacific. No, can you just, yes. So if we do very, very quick numbers here, what we are having is 150 conflicts every 4 years. That's the trend since 2020, let's say. Is it a trend or not? We will have to see. But from 2020 to 2023, we had around 150. Then if we go up to 2050, we will be talking about thousands of conflicts around water. If you go to the web to see what those conflicts are about, you will see that we're talking about killings, cattle killings, people destroying each other's crops, migration, which is one of the highest reasons why people migrate when there's water scarcity, and so on. So at the IFRC, we have a super solid and strong water and peace framework. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. That is, let's say, focused on three main pillars. Then these are not so technical. If there is interest to know how we unpack these pillars, you can come always back to us. So the first one is understanding. And the most important thing here is to say that we do this at the household level, which is the most local level that we can reach out, given the fact that we do have 17 million volunteers in the field, and that our work is directly with the households and the families where the conflicts around water scarcity might start. And of course, households do have the main role in order to prevent this conflict. So understanding is the first pillar. So we do need our communities to understand what is happening. People do not know why we're fighting over water and what are all the layers behind this. So build awareness, assess dynamic, map stakeholders, communities that are at risks, understanding all the dynamics, meaning who has access, how the water is distributed, why my neighbor has more water and I don't have water, why am I paying more than the people next to me, etc. Who controls this, which groups are excluded, which ones are including, what is included, what is the relationship between people and water. Then we go to the second pillar of the approach, which is learning and preparing. And this is where we talk about capacity building and how to manage our resources better. And we, again, try to talk here about on the community level issue more than water facilities or water services, etc. Then after learning and preparing, we have the third pillar, which is mobilizing. Now we understand, we learned, we prepared, but how do we translate this into action? So just to finalize, the important thing here is to call for attention. People are fighting over water. Households, kids, women, families are fighting over water. This is bringing lots of negative impact to our development, and this is becoming worse and worse with the years. We shouldn't be fighting over water. It is a human right, and this is our call for today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Maria, for this very insightful presentation. And indeed, sort of the data that you presented from the Pacific Institute on the water conflict incidents and so on, it is worrisome indeed. And of course, very important that you underlined these community, that we look at water and peace not only from the transboundary perspective and nation states and so on, but really also look at the community level. And there, these three pillars, understanding, learning, and mobilizing, are certainly crucial, as is, as you underlined, that water is a human right. And rather than fight over it, we really need to think about how we can convert water, as you said, into a peace tool. And with that, I'd now like to give the floor to Natalia Blanco from the ICRC, who will give us a presentation a bit more on the humanitarian role in supporting prospects for peace in connection with water. So, Natalia, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric, and good morning, everyone in the room and online. I hope you can hear me well. So I will start right to the point. The ICRC has water specialists embedded in almost every ICRC delegation worldwide. And that's because from our experiences, water services and other essential services are systematically impacted by armed conflict. These impacts can be direct, they can be indirect or reverberating, cumulative over time, and they are often severe. From our experiences, it shows that these effects can be preventable, often predictable, and it can be avoided or at least mitigated through adherence to international humanitarian law. Please, Sasha, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. This law provides a practical, highly relevant framework to protect water resources during armed conflict. And this law does not only protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, it also lays the groundwork for dialogue and cooperation. So our approach in the ICRC, if you can also go please to the next slide, is based on rooted in deep contextual analysis, in close engagement with local actors and communities, of course, sustain dialogue with all parties, and what we call the neutral, independent, impartial humanitarian action approach that allow us to advocate for equitable and inclusive access along the lines of conflict. So to illustrate this approach, today I would like to share two examples. The first one from Goma, that is a city that has been heavily impacted by armed conflict, protracted armed conflict for over 20 years, and that is hosting around 1 million internally displaced people. So there, the ICRC is designing and building the water supply interventions through an active involvement from the communities, also together with the Red Cross volunteers. We are also working very closely with the local service providers, and that is to ensure that we have equitable access to everyone, benefiting both the hosting communities and the IDPs alike, in order to minimize this risk that we were mentioning of rising tensions between different groups. Sasha, if you could go to the next slide and the next one, yes. So in January, the M23 armed group took over the city, and the city became the center of hostilities. The electrical network was heavily damaged, causing power loss that affected many critical infrastructure, hospitals, but also including, of course, water treatment plants and other key infrastructure, affecting the water supply to the communities. And we quickly saw how many IDPs left the camps, showing that sustainable access to water is key for community resilience. So the ICRC acted quickly in order to avoid further disruption, and we provided fuel to critical infrastructure, particularly to water treatment and pumping stations, in order to reestablish as much as possible the water supply, including a water tracking emergency program. But in parallel, we also worked with all stakeholders to understand and see what could be done for a more sustainable solution. So acting as a neutral intermediary, we negotiated safe access to the operators in order to repair the power lines damaged under the protection of the Red Cross emblem. that was possible basically thanks to our sustained presence in the area for many years and to our trusted dialogue with both the official authorities but also the de facto authorities. In this intervention, we also reminded all parties on the importance of protecting of their obligations basically under IHL to protect critical infrastructure and to maintain essential services to the population. The second example is here in Ukraine, but it's pre-2022. It was a context that was marked by a frozen conflict where there were clearly divided areas separated by a front line. Here the issue was that the water being supplied to the non-governmental control area was basically coming from a river that was in the government control area. So basically the government authorities and utilities were bearing the cost of the water, of treating and pumping the water to the other side. So there was the question raised on how to fairly share the cost of this water supply. So the ICRC worked together with the authorities and the utilities from both sides to address the issue. So what we did was to meter the volume of water that was being pumped to the other side, and we facilitated the arrangements for the payments to be basically paid based on actual consumption. So the goal here was, of course, to ensure equitable access to both sides, that the people in these sites were paying appropriately for the cost of the water, and of course also to ensure that the divisions were not getting worse or that there was not entrenching, let's say, tensions between both sides. So to conclude, if you can go please, Sasha, to the last slide. So humanitarian action is no substitute for political solutions, but it's clear that meeting people's needs equitably and maintaining or giving space for dialogue between opposing sides is vital for both a most effective response, but also to give the space for potential dialogue between these opposing sides and different groups, and of course showing the potential, as Maria was saying also, of water being a united power instead of a division power. So, and lastly, I would like to share here the 3 reports by the IFRC jointly with other organizations that raise awareness on the consequences of the armed conflicts on the essential services, and it provides some recommendations to minimize the risk for public health risk, of displacement risk, and also the cost of rebuilding the infrastructure after the conflict was ended. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Natalia, for really highlighting the ICRC's work regarding response to these humanitarian difficult situations, and for showing us how the essential services are really like how it's all interrelated and connected often to water, how like power loss can impact critical infrastructure, and this in turn then also impacts vulnerable people such as IDPs. Sort of these reverberating effects that are really widespread also for human health and so on. So thank you very much for illustrating this and for showing the ICRC's great work. And with that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague from the Geneva Water Hub, Jean Villemain, who will provide us with insights from the Geneva Water Hub's work, particularly in the Sahel region. So Jean, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. Thanks to Red Cross colleagues for hosting us for this session today at Stockholm Water Week. And so, yes, we're the Geneva Water Hub. We are a co-center jointly attached to the University of Geneva and the Geneva Graduate Institutes that is supported and working with the Swiss Development Corporation. Our mandate is to promote water for peace as an instrument for peace and cooperation. So we've been launched 10 years ago. Next slide, please. Jointly with the task to help the setup of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace that was launched in the International Geneva in 2015 with the mandates given by 15 co-convening countries to study the link between water, peace, and security. So this panel released its report in 2017 called A Matter of Survival that set for the first time of the international community history water at the crossroad of the three global agendas of peace, development, and humanitarian action. It called upon also international community to use water as an entry point for peace and social cohesion in a very practical way. Also calling to address the problematic of a fragmentation institution using a safe spaces approach to gather people around these three agendas, working in given territories, and together creatively induce new approach initiatives to use water for peace building efforts. Next slide, please. Since the release of this report, we propose the reflection of the panel and its framework to the actors engaged in the Sahel and the Sahel crisis, with a number of actors that have been consulted through safe spaces, be it in Geneva or in the region or even at the local level. And out of this dialogue facilitated by our organization came out a debate about fragility that should be looked on three different levels. First, at the international level, with the issue of coordinating in the international community. There was momentum for the security development nexus at the time that had some strong debates. There is also the whole approach being spearheaded by Red Cross colleagues, World Bank, about humanitarian development nexus. We jointly with UNICEF with this report joining forces. But acknowledging the fact that we don't know yet exactly how to do developments in fragile and armed conflict settings, and there's a way to explore this. We should explore this in protracted conflict. In particular, how we can reinforce indigenous institutions that can foster water cooperation, be it at the local, intersectoral, or transboundary level. Recognizing that also ODA approaches sometimes hampered also the continuity of the functioning of these institutions, and how the state can reduce inequalities and foster new social contracts, and therefore, of course, using water as an entry point for these peace building goals. And then, of course, there's the issue of the local fragilities with actors that in some settings have dire humanitarian needs that should be quickly addressed, but in other settings, specifically in protracted conflicts, needs technical and financial support to also be the driver and agents of the way they can use and themselves their own local diplomacy between communities to engage on the peace building efforts. And so we had also safe spaces with local leaders in the Sahel that was sharing with us their difficulties to know on what door to knock to get this support. So for instance, on the right part of the screen, you see a picture that was drawn during this discussion that reflects a bit the perception from the field, these beneficiaries that don't really know how to engage with the states or these donors, and with the states that is often more focused on the donor relation, that engaging on some type of dialogue with beneficiaries. So these are all contributors, factors of the fragilities. Next slide, please. So what to do with this in a creative way to try to boost spaces for reflection around these water points and the role of local communities. How to use it in a creative way. For instance, we've been supporting also the authorities of Mauritania at the UNHCR, jointly with two think tanks of Mauritania, CEROS and IPAR, to try to create these spaces, improve various types of Sahelian water points based on solutions driven by refugees and host communities. The aim there is to produce new management prototypes of traditional water points based on the ideas of the water, the users of the water points themselves, and try to rehabilitate the local capacity of having deliberative process and also bringing new ideas to improve this management at technical level and ultimately in the way that water point is being used to occupy the space and exploit natural resources between communities. So for this, we are proposing two supports, scientific mediators that can help in an intuitive way to understand law of physics and boost the reflection of these communities, but also working with the film communities, with Norwegian University of Tromsø and Bamako that have been working on creating film with communities under the condition that they participate to the editorial process so that it gives a boost to the reflexivity of these actors. Next slide, please. Ultimately, there's a lot of challenges in the region, but also there are important institution models that have also shaped the global discussion, including in the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace. So at the last UN Water Conference in New York 2023, we proposed this session on sharing water in fragile context jointly with the Dakar Water Hub, with our strategic partners in the region. And the key ideas of this session is to explore the new ways of using the principle of sharing benefits of the water instead of sharing water as a piece of cake. So how do you build an institution that can help see water as a common good and invest jointly in this and then share the benefit that gets out of it? So it was historically used as the core principle of the OMVS. This is the basin agency shared by Guinea, Mali, Mauritania, and Senegal, that was famously known for being the diplomatic door to solve the 1989 crisis between Senegal and Mauritania. But interesting enough, it was also used, it's also being used by Niger with the High Authority of Peacebuilding at the inter-community level, whereby they propose this permanent dialogue with rival communities. And once they are ripe to seal a social contract, they seal this social contract by building a borehole for pastoralist purposes. So last slide, please. We are supporting actors, specifically Dakar Water Hub and other partners, to more explore this creativity around this principle. So, and we'll be organizing in a month a colloquium in Dakar that is targeted in this ambition of the Water Hub of Dakar to co-create what will be the Afro-centered approach to hydrodiplomacy that will be just presented now by my colleagues from the Dakar Water Hub, Dr. Boubacar Bari. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Jean, for highlighting the Water for Peace initiative in Mauritania, the approach of the Geneva Water Hub, also in terms of these scientific mediators, as you mentioned, for outlining the different kinds of fragilities and challenges that come with that, and also for making the point that despite of a lot of problems and challenges that are for sure there in the African context, as also Maria has highlighted before, there's also indeed, of course, some institutional models like the OMVS and so on that should guide peace-building efforts also elsewhere in the world. And that's actually a nice segue to our last presentation that we have now from Dr. Boubacar Bari, who will give us some insights about Afro-centered hydrodiplomacy and water as a vector of peace in the Sahel. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to our online panelist, Dr. Bari.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure for me to make this presentation, showing a little bit my experience in West Africa in general. And the presentation is a personal view after 40 years of experience in West Africa, of my understanding on how water can be a vector for peace in the Sahel region. As you may know, please, next slide, please. The Sahel is presented in general as a region of Africa, mainly of West Africa, is water scarcity. But I would like people to keep in mind that when we talk about water scarcity in the Sahel, we are mainly talking about not too much physical scarcity, but rather economic scarcity, because countries don't have enough resources to invest into water development and sharing. West Africa and mainly the Sahel is also a source of conflict, armed conflict here and there in many countries. And at the same time, water becomes one of the means that are targeted by some of these belligerents. Next. The context in the pressure in this region is very, very high. There are limited, as I said, water resources because very little has been developed, and it's unevenly distributed and vulnerable to climate change. As you know, the Sahel is characterized by extreme situations, climatic situations like droughts, long period of droughts. People may remember the droughts in the early 70s that led to the creation of basin organizations like OMVS, or in 81, the creation of the Niger River Basin Authority. So there is an increase on the competition also through agriculture, pastoralism, energy, and drinking water. There is also an inter-community and cross-border tension exacerbated by scarcity, because in any of these given sources of water, you have different communities sharing it, and then most of the time it can create issues and difficulties. But we need to keep in mind that what is happening in general, we have some indigenous knowledge that was put in place in some communities, like the Mosi community in Burkina Faso, in part of the communities along by the shores of the Lake Chad, in general, to manage and regulate any conflict that happen in between the users. Next. Now, when we talk about Afro-centered hydro diplomacy, we need to look at three elements that are interlinked and that serve the purpose. One is the inclusion. We need a woman and youth involvement, as well as local communities in governance of water. Traditionally, women are in charge of water in many of the West African communities. But today, when we look at what is put in place with the water governance today in most of the countries, there are very few women involved into decision-making process. While in the traditional society, they are the one in charge of water. Young girls are the one fetching water and bringing potable water into the house for domestic purposes. There is also we need, and that is more and more important, the hybrid knowledge, combine modern science with traditional knowledge. Because in fact, the modern science allow us to assess how much water we have, what is available, and what's the quality, and how best can we protect the resources. With the traditional knowledge, is how can we protect it from being disturbed or from being spoiled for the rest of the community. Also, to the benefit sharing, as my colleague Jean mentioned earlier, to look at water as a lever for shared development rather than just making peace for sharing the resources. Is better we combine efforts, especially if you're in a region where you have economic scarcity. It's better to pull together all the resources available from the different communities in order to build something and share the benefits rather than deciding on how best we can share the volume of water. These four elements are interlinked. Next. Water as an instrument of cooperation. The Sahel case. As I said, in the early 70s, when there was this very severe drought, I think it was in 72, 73, 74, that has led to the creation of river basin organization like NBS, which is the Senegal River Basin Organization, as well as the Gambian River Organization. As I speak, I'm sitting in the Gambia, working on these issues also too. Now, what is important in the creation of this river basin organization is how best to look at how integrated water management can be done in these basins, mainly in the management of dams. As you may know, there are two dams on the Senegal River Basin. One is a hydropower dam based in Mali, in Manantani, and the other one is the one in between Senegal and Mauritania, which is an anti-salt dam, which stopped the seawater getting into the paddy irrigation fields and getting into the water, into the river on a long distance. Now, the Niger River Basin Authority also too was created, I think, since 1981, also too from Conakry at Farana, from Guinea at Farana. is to put all the 9 countries, because if you look at the river basins in Africa in general, in West Africa in particular, there is no one single river that is not shared for at least by 2 countries. The same can be said around the.
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I just kindly request you to wrap up your presentation within the next minute, please?
Yes, I'm finished. Next one, you can move to the last one. Okay. Now, we have what I mean in here is the Afro-centered hybrid diplomacy contributes mainly to regional stability and food security. It also to protect from peace, for peace and dialogue and reconciliation, and strengthen institutional and community capacity, and also is linked to the Africa vision, the SDG vision on 2023. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Bari, for these insightful remarks. And I particularly have to say I love the 4 overlapping circles that you showed on one slide with the inclusion, multi-level cooperation, hybrid knowledge, and benefit sharing aspects that are, of course, crucial. And this concludes our presentations from our esteemed panelists, and gives me the room to now move to a first round of questions. And I'd like to start us off with Maria, who did the first presentation. And I'd like to ask her if she can walk us very briefly through a concrete example where a community-led water security initiative helped in preventing tensions. And if there is a good one, what made it successful?
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, for the question. So I was thinking in the last weeks about an example to bring today and share with all of you. And I found one, and I would say the one that has had more impact and good results in the last years. So around 2015, our Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center, together with the Netherlands Red Cross, identified a let's say, big issue around water conflict in Ethiopia, specifically in the Somali region, where fighting over water was becoming the day-to-day. So what was happening there was a lot of fights between communities, casualties, crops destruction, cattle killings, and so on. Not only because of the lack of water itself, but because of all the consequences of not having water, which is, of course, as we all know, expressed in economy, cohesion, and many other things. Mr. Barry was talking about food security and so on. So what we did was to include the community since the beginning, which is something we all talked about here. And we did it because we thought, and we continue going that way, that the community should be the one identifying the problem, doing the whole analysis behind that problem, and also proposing the solutions to it. So it wasn't an easy process, and it takes lots of years to see the impact of this. It sounds like something very easy. I bring the community and I ask what the problem is. They give me the problem, then they tell us what the solutions are, and we make them real. It's not how it is. It takes a lot to include the peace framework within something that starts from being a humanitarian need, and then we have to go through the whole nexus up to seeing what the impact is in the long run, so peace, which is what we're looking for in the end. So what happened here is, so as I said, they identified the problem, they brought solutions to the table, we made all of this real, but apart from this, we had to look a lot into how do we manage all these solutions that they are bringing here, because one, the lack of water management and water governance over what we're what they were proposing was something that we needed to work on. So a lot of capacity building there, etc. So what happened here is some years later, this takes years, as I said, we saw that there was mitigation of community tensions, conflict was reduced, migration during dry periods was decreasing, reducing stress for children, elders, women that were able to stay in their locations because they were migrating in the last decades when the dry seasons. Cattle death reduced, less time for fetching water, and of course, better health, which is what we are also all looking for, apart from economic development and livelihoods and food security, nutrition, etc. So what made it successful, according to the conclusions that we have been working on and trying to take out of this case study, was the fact that the solutions were community proposed. They came out of the community. It wasn't saying we need to build a dam here because this and that reasons. They were the ones saying we need new rainwater harvesting systems that are managed in a different way so that we can secure water during dry seasons and stop fighting over that, specifically during the dry season. And then we also need to build dams and work around having new management systems of those dams. So again, it was community-led, solutions were proposed by communities, and I think this is what made it successful in the end. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Maria, for this very concrete example. Indeed, it's often something that we forget, but most water problems, they're very local in nature. So it makes perfect sense, as you outlined, to really involve the communities from the get-go. And it's also, I think, from what you said, if the success was mainly due to the community proposed solution, then that's definitely something that we should advocate for and continue to do. So thank you very much for this really great concrete example. And I'd like to just remind participants online that if they want to ask questions, then can put them in the chat. I'll hope we get to at least 2 or 3 questions later. But also because of this and because this is only a 1-hour session, I'd like to ask our panelists now for the following questions to keep the answers really concise, if possible, within 1 minute. Sorry about that. But so the next question would be for Natalia. In fragile contexts, how can water protection serve as an entry point for reconciliation based on your experience?
So, yeah, thank you, Eric. Well, from our field experiences, we've seen that damage or destruction of critical infrastructure, and particularly water, can bring devastating effects on the populations, and these reverberating effects that we were mentioning before, like, for example, displacement, casualties, public health emergencies like cholera, etc. And of course, these effects can only aggravate the grievances that fuel conflict and obstruct later the conversations for peace. And we are aware that peace is the best, most efficient way to limit suffering, human suffering. And IHL does not govern the reasons to go to war, nor dictates the terms for peace. But it helps to create this space for phasing out the conflict and then later have these negotiations for peace. So protection of critical infrastructure, for example, it can allow people to stay in their homes if they wish to, reducing displacement. It can also, for example, reduce the material cost of war, making then the socioeconomic recovery more likely later and fostering stability. And this is what brings peace dividends. No? So for us, protecting water services is not just a legal obligation. Is also a humanitarian imperative and just a long-term investment in the community's stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And in the interest of time, I just pass the floor right on to Jean with my next question, which is what lessons from the Geneva Water Hub strategic reflection are most relevant for bringing the bridging the gap between policy and local action.
Thank you, Eric. Very shortly, what struck us in the dialogue we had is the consensus among not only humanitarian and peacebuilding professionals, but also development and military experts of the need to have these community-led approaches. And that also means that top-down planning states approach has its limitation, and we should start to think differently for two key reasons. First, the question of groundwater related to economic scarcity that Dr. Barry raised. The fact that we more and more we're going to rely on these resources, that it's much more complex, and in terms of temporality of flow, it's much more slow. So when a problem arises, it's always at the local level that you have to deal with it. So you need to create this local agency. Secondly, we also need to understand more the dynamics around water points. So for the time being, public policies are built upon the concept of coverage rates, access to water, but that doesn't tell you much about what's the whole efforts in terms of dynamic of community behind it. So one last anecdote, one pastoralist network was inaugurating a borehole in Sahelian states, and the minister asked how much it cost. And when they got the figures, that's way too expensive. But you need to raise awareness of when there's a really difficult area and you're putting all these efforts. The infrastructure itself just comes at the end to seal the whole dynamics. You manage to engage with the local communities.
Thank you very much, Jean. And now to the question for our last speaker, Dr. Bari. If you can tell us, with a view to the 2026 water conference, how does Afro-centered hydrodiplomacy offer a different pathway for addressing water-related tensions? And, how could this inform the discussions at these high-level events? Please, within 1 minute. Thank you. And I think you're muted, Dr. Bari. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. I will try to keep it very short, though the question is very interesting. So what I mean is this Afro-centered hydrodiplomacy, as I mentioned, as I said it, I'm giving my own personal opinion, offers an alternative to conventional approaches by framing water as a vector of peace and cooperation. As such, it falls into the 2026 UN water. The reason is the difference is rather than simply source of rivalry, it builds on African agenda, the Africa Water Agenda of 2063. It also to put together scientific and transitional knowledge and promote inclusive governance that involve states, communities, women, and youth. It is the inclusiveness is what is research. Though both local trust building projects in general, we build wells, gardens, pastoral corridors, and basin-wide agreements like ONVG, ONVS, NBA, Lake Chad, Volta. Each Afro-centered hydrodiplomacy shows how water can stabilize fragile regions. At the UN 2026 Water Conference, it could inspire a global water peace compact, offering transferable models in other conflict-prone regions such as the Horn of Africa or the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, as I said, and I think also my colleague Jean said, there is of course a lot to learn from African hydrodiplomacy and how water can help, particularly in fragile regions. So with that, I'd like to take some questions from the chat. I already see there is a very practical first question that was regarding the presentations that were shared today, and it's to the panelists whether they would be open and willing to share those presentations. I don't know, I'm just looking in the room. Would that be all right? Okay. And Boubacar Bari, would that also be all right with you if we share the presentations?
Yes. No doubt. Right. It's okay.
Then we'll see if we can maybe provide them through the Stockholm World Week platforms or otherwise. Then we have a question regarding if there are sustainable solutions to water scarcity. So a rather broad question, but I don't know if there is one of our panelists that'd like to address that. So the question is sustainable solutions to water scarcity.
Well, sorry, we cannot propose a magic stick, but we can for sure propose the process. I mean, it's around the issue of deliberative process that water scarcity should be addressed. And so that is really clear in the expectations we hear from a network of partners. They want to create this discussion on how the scarcity situation can be managed in new models of institutions that are there to share water. So, and therefore, again, I think Saharan countries and more widely other water scarce countries could be a model also for other parts of the world, even in the Western world that is now experiencing the end of the abundancy of water. We should be also looking at new models to deal with our own situation. Thank you.
Brilliant answer, Sean. Many thanks. Then we have a last question to Dr. Bari online. It says, I was wondering what the experiences are like in involving traditional knowledges. My feeling is that governments may be reluctant in adopting them, or new approaches use procedures that take more time. Dr. Bari, if you may be able to respond to that within a minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very nice question. Indeed, the person who asked the questions know exactly what's going on. Most of the time, we don't take care of the indigenous knowledge. These are built into the society, and they've been there. Good examples on how to preserve the resources, the quality for a long period of time in a very scarce, in an environment where water, the scarcity is too much, too very important. So to me, the governments, any of these African governments need to keep in mind that the knowledge, the scientific knowledge alone is not sufficient. Is necessary, but it's not sufficient to understand, to put in place a better governance instrument. They need to get into the local knowledge from the different leaders who are in the field. And for that, they need to create some community water community management systems where everybody has his say on the decision-making process. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we're nearing the end of the session. I'd like to warmly thank all of our panelists today and all of you online for joining us and for your good questions. Unfortunately, we're unable to take more questions right now, as we will close the session in 2 minutes. And as moderator, I'd just like to highlight sort of 3 takeaways from today's session. The first is that I think it became clear that water for peace is achievable, particularly with inclusive governance, anticipatory action, and cooperation across sectors. So here, speaking particularly about the triple nexus. This leads me to the second point, which is really that the humanitarian development peace nexus is not just theory. We heard today concrete examples of how it can work in practice. And the third point I'd like to make is that we really need to elevate water as a peace-building priority, which also means we need to provide sufficient funding and create partnerships and commitment to this goal. So my call to action is simple. Let's ensure water is seen not just as a risk, but as a solution, a true catalyst for peace. And on behalf of our panelists and organizers, thank you again for joining us, and I encourage you to carry forward today's insights into your own works and partnerships. So thank you very much, and with that, I'd like to close this online session.